Hello, everyone. Randy Harrington here. Tonight's video is going to be two separate interviews with two gentlemen, and I'm sure you guys are probably aware of both of these gentlemen's stories. But the specific parts of these stories I want to cover is the fact that when these encounters took place, there were things prior to this that happened on the property which tells you that they were there all along. It just so happened that this encounter is what opened it up to these victims, if you, as you could say. Uh, they had their encounter, and then only after the fact do they realize that the Bigfoots were there all along. They just never paid attention to the details of that these creatures were there. And it reminds me back to several stories that I've been aware of. For instance, during the Bullet Maker incidents back in 2008, 2009, uh, Bullet Maker and myself interviewed a lady across the lake at a place called Talala. It was a rural property outside of Talala. Talala is just a small speck of a town with lots of rural areas. Well, she had an incident happen where she watched a Bigfoot walk out of a wood line and go to her neighbor's fence gate, unlock a gate, go through to a chicken coop, unlock the chicken coop door, go in, come out with one chicken in its hand, and close the gate, close the door, clasp, lock and all, not lock, but just a clasp with a bracket that closed the door, and then go through the gate, close the gate, and walk back into the woods carrying one chicken. Now, I was told this story back in 2008, maybe 2009. And at the time, at the beginnings of what I've learned so far, I, I'm not quite sure I believed her, not quite sure. I needed more evidence. Uh, it was hard to jump from where I was at then to listening to what clearly these things have an understanding of staying under the radar in a manner that means put everything back in its place. Don't leave any evidence that you were there. Another incident within that location was a lady who caught one elbow deep in some sweet feed, horse feed, molasses sweet feed. She walked into her barn one time and a Bigfoot was froze there with its arms into a feed barrel elbow deep. Uh, so it was clearly munching down on some molasses feed when she started to open up the door and it froze. And she saw it. Well, it vacated the back of the barn through an opening. But it's just another incident where these people had no idea Bigfoots are on their property or showing up all the time in a circuit, and we've learned these circuits are probably happening even at the 400 location where Shane and I are researching now. For a long time, Shane understood that there was a pattern there where they were on this property for a week and then gone for 2 weeks, or some assimilation or facsimile of that pattern, where gone for a while, back for a while. It's almost like they make these big loops where they know where they can go and procure some food products, whether it be seasonal fruits, fruit bearing trees, farms, even dog food on a porch, things like that. They can make a big circuit and know that they can get a little bit to eat in all of these different areas, and rabbit hutches, hog pens, chicken coops, whether it be eggs or chickens themselves. Clearly they've learned that if you take one chicken, then nothing will ever change. The population of chickens will just keep replenishing itself. They'll show up next month, take another chicken, and nothing ever changes. They can get a free chicken like that every time they show up. But if they went in there with the kids, with the wife and kids, and just decimated the chicken coop and tore up the whole place and left nothing but feathers and carcasses and took what they wanted, if that's how they did things, then that wouldn't be available for very long. A farmer would change his tactics. He would put better locks. He would guard the chicken coop, uh, put up lights, all kinds of things. So they've understood, at least from the stories that I've learned, that they can stay under the radar and keep themselves fed, especially in rural areas, by just getting what they need, taking what they need. Don't take too much, just enough to sustain themselves, and then move on to the next one. It's self-replicating. I hope you get this from these stories. Both of these stories are going to be very traumatic as far as the content of the encounter. But keep in mind, these are both in areas where the creatures had always been. To me, that's what we need to get from this, because you may be in an area where they're at, you just don't know it yet. So let's enjoy this for the information that's there, and of course, I'll make a commentary at the end also.
Grab that first pine tree, that's when I can see all the skin on the inside of his arm. And it took me a second. I can actually see the length of the arm and the size of the forearm. And I think that's when the size of this person really started to sink in. When he grabs that tree and he pulls himself up beside it like this and squares up to me. That was the moment I could feel all the blood drain from my face. Like the life was draining from my body. And he's looking straight at me. And he starts to talk. Well, I think he's talking. It sounds like he's talking either to me or somebody around him. He starts to make this noise. And he shows his teeth like that. And sticks his tongue out like he's tasting the air. Strangest thing I'd ever seen. The first thing I had thought then was, somebody's messing with me. This has got to be, this can't be real. Somebody's playing a joke on me. They're about to get shot. That was literally just for a split second. And he goes back to doing this, and I can see the detail in the face. I can see everything. I can see he's 80 feet away. He's as close to me as you would play catch with someone. And just the facial movement. You can see this thing is real. He's this wide. I couldn't tell you how tall he was. He's standing down that grade. He's over 7 feet tall. He could have been 9 feet tall, I don't know. But he was massive. Think about a cow. Something the size of a cow standing up. Head probably weighs 30 pounds. His head's pointed. He's got hair all over his body, and it's hair. It's not fur. I can see the skin, the really, really dark gray skin up under. In spots. It's really thick in areas, and it's maybe 5-6 inches long on his body, 2 inches long on his head, and his hairline from here, just above his brow ridge, is where the hairline started. There was no forehead that didn't have hair on it. And it came back to a point like this. And you can see the little sprigs of hair off, maybe 2-inch long hair. Couldn't really see any ears. But after he did the thing with his teeth and stuck his tongue out, he goes back to talking again. Well, I'm sitting there freaking out. I'm petrified. There's the boogeyman is standing right there, and he's coming to get me, is what I'm thinking. So I get my hand, I'm still like this, I'm still leaned up against that tree. Well, I start to ease my hand down to grab the grip of the shotgun, just to get ready for whatever. And that really upset him. As soon as I started to make that movement, he had a hold of that tree and he did 2 side to side, and whoa, like, no. That went through me. It was like a wave of air and sound, like a pressure wave. And it hit me, and as soon as it hit me, it's like somebody scared the crap out of you. You know, you jump like this, and I jumped off. I took 2 steps out to the side. Now I'm out from under the tree, and I'm ready. I'm on my gun. If he's coming, I'm gonna get some shots off at him. Well, now I'm out from under the tree, and I can actually see now the top of the tree. He's got his hand on it, and it's getting it. He wasn't shaking it. It was just shaking because he's moving back and forth, and he has a hold of it. I can't see his hand really. He's got his left arm down to his side, and the hair is covering all but just about his fingertips, and I can't see his right hand at all. He's got it wrapped around this tree. I believe it was a male. I didn't really see any genitalia sticking out. I mean, there were no breasts. I believe that it was a male, just his extremely exaggerated features and the size. Once I came out and I'm standing there, you know, my heart's in my stomach and wrenching, and my head feels like it's about to explode, and I get like this tunnel vision, like everything out here is heat, you know, and just my focus area, my focal point is what I'm seeing, which someone told me later was adrenaline. So I mean, that made sense. But I'm standing there in my position, and I'm thinking, if he comes at me, I've got 3 shots. High brass number 4, turkey shots. I really don't think it's going to do anything to him. So when he comes, because I'm just convinced that these are my last moments and he's going to come after me, I can shoot him. It's an automatic 3 times as quick as I can in the head, run, and reload at the same time. That was my plan in my head. But I don't feel like I can move. I'm stuck right there, petrified. And he goes right back to talking. He'll do long, and mumble. And then he would do it again. And then he stopped. He took his hand off the tree. He turned his shoulders to the right, and he turned his head like this. Looked across his shoulder, down his nose, right at me. Never took his eyes off me. Took about 2 steps towards that game trail, smooth. Right through the thickest stuff you could imagine. He didn't get on the game trail. He was just off the game trail, turned away from me where I couldn't see him. I could see him a little bit, but not, I could see an outline, and then he starts to walk away, and I can see him a little bit, and then I can't see him, and I can see a little bit more of him, and then he probably gets 100 feet down, walking directly away from me, and he yells again, "Wah!" like a whip. Whoa! Assuming now it's like, get the hell out of here, you know. But even then, I didn't. I stood right there. The woods are dead silent. Beautiful sunny day, March, very little wind, not a bird, not a cricket. It was dead quiet, understandably. And I'm looking, there's a thicket behind me. And I'm standing out and I'm looking over my shoulder and listening. I can't hear him walking away anymore. I can't hear, there's nothing. And I probably stood there for another couple minutes until I actually realized, okay, I'm breathing, because I'm breathing really, really hard and heavy. My heart's beating out of my chest. I turn around, I grab my bag, I put it over my shoulder, I left my chair, I left my calls. That stuff's probably still out there. I had my gun, I took 3 more shells out of my pocket and put them in my hand, and I walked out. And as I'm walking out, I'm telling myself, that was a Bigfoot. That was a Bigfoot. That was a Bigfoot. And I'm shaking, my knees are shaking, and I'm petrified. I just know I'm not making it out. I have a half a mile to walk to my 4-wheeler. Probably the longest walk of my life. And I can't remember a whole lot of that walk other than every now and then stopping abruptly to listen. to see if anything's following me. If something's following you, you stop. They'll take a couple more steps. You can hear it. I never heard any of that. When I finally made it almost all the way out. There's a road that turns and goes up a hill. That's where my four-wheeler was sitting. Well, the bottom of that hill is probably about 200 feet from my four-wheeler. When I made that turn, and it's starting to open up, I'm starting to feel a lot better about actually making it out. I stopped at the bottom of that hill and I turned around. And when I turned around, I heard like a huge tree, a fresh tree branch or a tree had just got broken in the woods. It sounded like a rifle going off. And that's when I turned around and ran. Actually ran to my four-wheeler. I got on my four-wheeler. I didn't want to put it in reverse and then back up, not see what I was doing. But I had to. I backed it up, drove up to the house. I pushed the four-wheeler up beside the house, got in my truck, reached over in the back. I grabbed my 7mm Magnum. I loaded it and I sat there for about 5 minutes.
Now, when Carrie talks about the branch breaking or the tree being broke, the only thing that I have in reference to that would be the video I put out about the bluff charge in Washington. When you hear the pow of the branch breaking, where the branch was being ripped off the trunk. That's the only thing I can relate to that particular incident that he describes. But yes, does sound like a gunshot. Also, he describes the scream and the distortion. Also, I put a video out with Mike Bluler, and him describing the scream of his incident and the facial distortion. So those are two incidents that are similar. So here, Carrie is going to go into the descriptions of things happening on that hunting lease, and this is all very close to a house that owns this property. So he's going to talk about all the things that happened prior to his encounter that tells him that they were probably there all along.
Because even walking out of there, I think I was starting to put things together that all these things that had been happening out there were these creatures. They had been there the whole time. Because I would hear strange things. I think they tried to run me out of there before then. Like I said, I was just too dumb to realize what was happening. Mm-hmm. But it happened mostly when I would use a call. Now, I had a Primos can call. Cam knows what I'm talking about. You turn it over and it sounds like a doe bleat. Bah. It's just one of those cans, you just turn it over every time. Well, I would go to this one spot, and it had at least a dozen times I know this happened. I would get up in that tree, and I'd hit that can call, and almost immediately hear something just come crashing through the woods. And I'm thinking big buck, the whole time. Mm-hmm. You get buck fever. Everything's a huge buck, especially when it's like that. And it would come, cracking limbs, and bucks don't do that. They just don't. Even if they're mad, they're not going to do that. But I could hear this thing coming, and then it would get to the edge of a thicket and just stop. And that would be it. I would hear nothing else. And of course, in my mind then, before I knew really what was going on, it's a buck, and he just winded me. He's just beating me. This is the smartest buck I've run into. I can tell you times that I have belly crawled with my rifle in front of me on my elbows through the thickest stuff out there, trying to get into the position where I thought these things were bedded up, that I was going to catch them either coming into it or going out of it. That's how hard I hunted that place, trying to get this quote unquote buck. Mm. And, but it was things like that came back to me. I would be camping out there, and I heard an owl that I swear was somebody. And I was so convinced it was somebody that there was only one person that really knew where I was. And that was the guy that had hooked me up with his grandfather for the property. And I thought it was him, because it was literally like, who, you could hear
Mm-hmm.
the lungs, the breath in this hoot owl. And so I can remember, I don't remember exactly what I said to him, but I did say something to the effect of, I can hear you. I know that's you. You might as well come on out. But, he never came out. And I don't know what I thought about it. I remember hearing a fox yip that didn't sound quite right. It sounded like somebody, a person doing these things. So, and I would hear people talking. I would just hear like someone was walking down this logging road, and I mean, this is not a logging road that you can bring a vehicle down. It was bad. It was an old logging road. It had big ruts in it. There's just, you're not driving down it. It'd be hard to get a 4-wheeler down. But I'm thinking, okay, there's people walking down this logging road into here, and I can hear them talking. And I'd yell at them. I could remember yelling at them at least once. Hey, you're gonna get shot. So something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
But it was these creatures. They were out there. There's at least a family of them out there. They were out there the whole time. I heard kids playing down in the creek one day. I was in my shooting house early, and it's a long food plot. It's probably a 70-yard food plot I had right there. Well, on past the food plot is a grade down to a creek bed, probably about 200 yards, and I could hear kids screaming at each other, like playing. And the house is probably 700 or 800 yards from that spot up to the house. Probably the house is 1,000 yards from where I was. Well, I can't shoot that way now, so I get out of my shooting house and I'm going to walk down there and tell them to get their butt back at the house.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to be back here deer season. And I get down there and there's nobody there. I don't even hear kids playing at the house anymore. And so I think that was them. Then there was just so many things out there that if I would have known, have been even remotely aware, that I would have recognized as being one of these creatures. And that's the main reason we do what we do, is to push awareness. So there's not going to be that person out there that's like
Mm-hmm.
me. You don't have to believe that Bigfoot exists. Just consider it a possibility when you hear that loud tree knock, or when you hear that scream in the distance, or you hear something that sounds like two legs walking through the woods. And in that way, if it comes out on you, maybe you won't be too traumatized or messed up from it. You can prepare yourself for it a little bit.
Yeah, and to know that you're not the only one who have these experiences too.
Right. Well, that was the main reason for me looking into the subject to be.
All right. That was Carrie Arnold talking about uh, some of the things that had happened out there after his sighting that he recalled that more than likely was these creatures. Uh, and I would concur. Uh, but it just goes to show you the type of hunter that he was. He had been in there prior to all the deer seasons. I think he'd been going there for like 20 years. You could hear how close the house was to the location. So these creatures live in very close proximity to where we live, especially in these farm rural areas. Uh, I mean, think of the story that I just put out with the Scarboroughs in the Independence, Missouri. That was on a farmstead, only 100 acres. That these things seem to primarily be on, at least for a 2-year stretch. So these things are very comfortable staying very close to where we are. They are that comfortable with keeping themselves enough distance that they can evade us when necessary. Just so happened in this instance, it, uh, it, it Carrie Arnold was able to see it, and it was probably the same one that would come in aggressive on the bleeding deer calls that he would do, and then stop in a thicket because it could now see that it was Carrie doing it. So he was probably already building up a frustration to all of the times that Carrie had frustrated him, thinking that he was going to come in and get a deer kill or something, and see Carrie there. So he maybe this being at that moment had said, you know what, I've had enough of this guy. I'm tired of him coming in here and messing up what we got going on. So he chose that confrontational thing. Uh, Very interesting. Fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, next, we're going to go into uh, a friend of mine named Jason Weaver. I actually did an interview with Jason about 5 years ago when I was doing somebody else's podcast. I can't locate that. So, again, this is just going to be him talking about what happened to him when he was a boy on a farm in New York. Pay attention. It's on a farm where these creatures were there already prior to his encounter. So, listen to the details.
And my 11-year-old self didn't embrace it. Okay, so I'm just going to let you know that. As I said, I grew up on a dairy farm, and it was a small farm. We had about 80 head, and farm life was farm life. You know, I liked it. I was the youngest in my family. I didn't have to do a whole lot of work on the farm at that, at age 2 or 3 years old, but I liked doing it, carrying milk jugs and buckets and that kind of stuff, and feeding calves and playing in the hay and that kind of stuff. But my father's health got bad, and we ended up selling our farm, and we bought my mother's parents' place, my grandparents' place, and it had a farm there too, but it was more of a hobby farm. My grandfather had a pig barn that was built. It wasn't one of these kind of barns. It was like a lean-to type barn. The low end was at about 5 to 6 feet, and the high end was at about 11 to 12 feet. Okay, I'm just painting a story for you, or a picture for you. This little red X right here, that's where I grew up. Okay, all of this right here, and it keeps going. This just has to be the screenshot I say. This is all heavy wooded area. A lot of game, a lot of fresh water, a lot of cover, and a lot of fun as a kid. I loved running in the woods. I loved playing. I was the youngest in my family, as I said, and I lived out in the boonies, lived on a dead-end road. I had a couple of friends on the road, but for the most part, I played by myself. I used to play Davy Crockett and Cowboys and Indians, and I used to fashion spears and bows and, all that kind of stuff. And you could see my neck of the woods probably right about that much right there, okay? But this right here, it's a mecca for hunting and living, okay? So, one summer day, I'm not really sure what part of the year it was, but it was berry picking season. I want to say August, September. I'm not really sure what time of the year it was. Let me preface this with, we had cattle. As I said, we didn't have 80 head. We had more of a hobby farm. We had usually about a dozen heifers, a milk cow or two, horses, geese, chickens. I raised guinea pigs and rabbits and all that kind of stuff. And the way our barn was set up, when you come out the door of the barn, we had two pastures, and there was a tree line down the middle of them. And I had a horse that was a gelded Arabian, and he was beautiful, but he didn't get along with other livestock. So we couldn't pasture the horse and the cows together. So what we would do is we put the cows on one pasture and the horse on the other. And as they grazed, my horse over here had a real long lead rope, probably 20 foot long, tied to an old tractor tire rim. And he had water out there and everything, but he would graze in a circle, and then I would move the tire and he would graze. And when he'd beat down that pasture, we'd swap them over to the other, and the cows would, because they were grain fed, corn fed, but also pasture fed or grass fed. So our cows were very, they were contained, they were easily contained. We didn't have barbed wire. The center one here was barbed wire.
But this field over here the cows were contained with one single strand of electric fence all the way around. And sometimes they'd get out, but very rare they would get out. Well, something was spooking our cattle in the summer of 1980. And we would hear them bellowing, you know, and we'd go down there with our flashlights and not see anything. And the fence, as I said, it was a single strand of electric fence that was, you know, this high, okay? And so whatever it was, we thought it was wild dogs, coyotes, or we call them up there, we call them coy dogs. They're kind of a coyote, wild dog hybrid. And we thought maybe coy dogs were messing with the cows and they were scooting under the fence and that kind of thing. Well, we had a calf come up missing. And we figured it wandered under the fence. So we went looking for him into the woods. This was my house. My house is gone now. It's a new house. My house is here. The barn is on also. It was here. See this group of trees right here? It's grown out this way, but this used to be a fence line. And our pasture was part of this, and you know, swap them back and forth. What happened was we went into these part of the woods looking for the cattle because they used to, like I said, if they got out, they'd wander in the woods. We wandered about 300 or 400 yards in the woods, and we found the carcass of the calf, and its back legs were broken. At least one of them. I don't really remember if it was both of them, but I do recall at least one of them being broken. And the calf's head was missing. You could tell that something had twisted that calf's head and pulled it off, okay? And, you know, if you know anything about cattle, the neck part of even at a calf, that's a muscular part of a cow. And anything that has the strength to pull that off is pretty amazing. But we couldn't wrap our heads around it. Because who's going to think? No, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, I'm alluding to it. Our parents said, you know, they wrote it off, wild dogs, whatever.
Now, this is me interjecting into Jason's story. Where else have you heard me talk about a head being pulled off of a carcass? Well, a bullet maker's place. You know, we talked about a squirrel with the head pulled off, laying on the step of his camper that he was sleeping in. And again, the Ed Smith situation on that farm. If you go back and listen to the Ed Smith video that I put out, a pig with its head pulled off, left up, and the carcass left up in a tree. Very interesting. We're getting corroborating storylines that involve these creatures. Amazing.
Put it off, you know. When one night, as I said, the cows were spooked and some of them got out. We had 4 or 5 that got out. And so we had to go into the woods to look for these cows. And cows, they run in a straight line. They don't care. You know, they just brrr, and, you know, they're hard. I hate chasing cows, especially I hate doing it up and down hills and But so a couple of my friends, myself, my brother, and a couple of his friends, we take up, you know, handfuls of baling twine to fashion harnesses to bring the cows home. So we'd go out in the woods, and when we'd find one of the cows that was out there, we'd harness it up, and 2 of us would take the cow back up to the pasture. And we were missing one. We had found all but one. And so my brother and one of his buddies, they went off into the woods to see if they could find this other cow. And while they were gone, we found it over here. So 2 guys did, as I said, harnessed her up and took her up the hill. And then myself and one of the other guys left, sat and waited for my brother and his friend. We were waiting for a while, probably 15, 20 minutes. And then we hear a ruckus in the trees. And I can see my brother and his friend running to beat all, okay, through the woods, crashing. My nickname is Charlie, okay? I don't have Charlie in my name, but my brother has called me Charlie since I was little, because when I was a little boy, I had really blonde hair, and he said I looked like Charlie Brown, okay? So I was Charlie. My brother, and I love my brother, and he was my hero. Anything he told me to do, I did, because he was my hero. And I heard him yell, "Charlie, run." So they're running, I'm running. So we both, me and the other guy are waiting. We get up and we run up the hill. we get to the barn, we're catching our wind, and they call my brother Weaver. My last name's Weaver, obviously. And they're like, Weaver, what are we running from? And my brother says, we saw big monkey people, and one of them chased us. Well, you know, his friends start ridiculing him, like, Weaver thinks he saw Bigfoot. And my brother snickered, but I know my brother. My brother was not kidding, you know. And to this day, my brother will not talk about it. He lives on the property still. He will not talk about it. And he's had things happen, and when things happen, he's one of these guys that I ain't talking about it because of ridicule and, you know, that kind of thing. So that was the summer before. So I'll go back to where I was. Summer of 1981, I'm down picking berries. And I'm picking in this meadow. Okay? And how it worked is there was an active road. You kind of still see it. This is a dead end road. The road ended here, and then this is a hill. And then this road goes all the way down here. It's a tractor road. I only got a corner of it, but right over here is another big dairy farm, okay? And this was called the Eatley farm. And Mr. Eatley used to grow hay in these various fields back here, so he had tractors running up there all the time. Well, what we would do is we'd go take the tractor road, and then we had another road that kicked off this way. It's under this thing I made here. And then there was a trail. The road would go like this, and then there was a trail that would come off and lead to this meadow. And what my cousin and I was 11, and my cousin Jerry was 9, and Jerry is my step cousin. His mother married my mother's brother, so I didn't grow up with him, didn't know him my whole life. They actually had just built their house in this area, so I didn't know him real well, okay? But we became buddies, and we had snuck down through these woods this way instead of taking the trail. We had a pump house down here, and we had power running to the pump house, so we had a clear way where the poles were that ran the power down. So we went that way, and we come the back way on the berry thicket that was down there. I explained that to you because it's the only way I can figure out how what happened. You know, I'm not saying we snuck up on them, but I think we approached the field in a way where they weren't expecting us to come that way, okay? So we went down there. Like I said, his name is Jerry, and you got to picture this kid. I haven't seen him in 30-something years. He's got a lot of problems, emotional problems. He's in and out of jail and prison, but I don't think all of his problems are alluding or as a result of Bigfoot. But I think this had something to do with his problems as an adult, because we were picking berries, and when you're picking berries as a kid, you know, have y'all ever picked blackberries? Anybody? Okay, well, you know, when you're picking blackberries, it's usually, as a kid, it's usually one in the bowl, two in the mouth. You know, it's because it's a beautiful day and you're picking. And so I drew this, pardon my drawing, okay? I did what I could do. This is the meadow, okay? And here's the trail that I was telling you about that took you off the tractor road. And this is just the corner of the meadow. And this right here is how the berry thicket would grow in and out. These are berries. These are berries. This is me, and this is my cousin Jerry. Okay, so we're picking, and you know when you're picking berries, you reach in the cluster or reach into the thicket, and you pull them berries down in your hand. If they're ripe, they fall in your hand. If they're not, they don't. But when you're picking those berries, especially if you're having a berry picking contest, your eyes are on the next cluster because you're looking for the next one to move to, you know? So that's what was going on, and you're eating, and, you know, well, my cousin Jerry is standing here. He starts to go into a kind of a breakdown. Now, again, you gotta pardon me and forgive me because it's an emotional thing for me, because when I talk about it, it takes me right back there. So he goes into a meltdown. I want to go home. 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 And I'm looking at him like, what is wrong with this kid? And he did. He dropped his bowl, and he ran behind me off the trail like his tail was on fire, and he ran home. And I thought, what a weird kid. More berries for me, okay? So go on. You know, I didn't worry about it. So I'm picking, as I said, I'm reaching into the berry thicket and I'm picking berries and I'm eating. And to my right, where Jerry had run, I heard a terrible whistler, real loud, enough to get my attention. And I look over and I'm like, it was coming from like this area over here. And I'm like, knock it off, Jerry. I know that's you. Knock it off. I keep picking. And I'm working my way around this cluster, okay? So I go back to picking berries, and I hear the whistle again. And I was reaching into the bush, and I turned my head, and when I reached into the bush, I touched hair. Now, I've touched a lot of things in berry bushes. I've touched birds and bird nests and snakes. Snakes love to sun themselves, you know. I've reached into the bush and felt a snake moving right under my fingertips. You know, you feel the scales on this thing. I'd never touched hair before. So as soon as I touch hair, I pull my hand back and I can see something. So I'm standing about here. And I'm doing one of these. I'm probably 7 to 8 feet away from the bush. And I'm trying to figure out what it is I'm seeing because the shape doesn't look right. Doesn't look like a deer. We don't have bear in that area. Doesn't look like a dog. And I still can't figure out what it is. So, but every time I would lean, this thing would shift. Now I'm going to tell you what he was doing. He was squatted like this. And he was standing right here. This is him. He's a yellow guy. But he's black. He was squatted in here. Not maybe it's just one solid line. But you know how berry bushes grow. They're kind of loose. He was squatted in there. And every time I would lean, he would stick his face into the thicket. And I'm like, what is that thing? And he squatted like this. And I saw the massive shoulder here. I saw his arm. I saw where the thigh and the calf crease. And I followed down. And I see an ankle bone and 3 outside toes on his right foot. And I realized that's a people foot. And I realized what it is that I'm seeing. And all the wind left my body. You know when you have a dream and you're trying to scream and you can't make any noise? I wet my pants. I ain't proud of that, but I'll tell you, I have to explain this to you because this is what I went through. And I couldn't move. And my fight or flight mechanism kicked in. I dropped my bowl and I ran home. I told my parents, I saw a monster. I saw a Bigfoot. And again, my parents are pragmatic. They grew up during the Depression. Their definition of monster is hunger and Hitler, okay? Bigfoot is silly. There's no such thing. You saw a deer or a dog or somebody's messing with you, but you did not see a Bigfoot. Now, I'm a bright child. I'm an artist. I used to love to copy comic book covers. I learned all about anatomy, drawing comic book covers. I know all about foreshortening. I know what muscles looks like. I know, and what I saw was no damn deer. But the damage was done, so to speak. And my psyche was crippled. And I had nightmares for years. The first few months after that, it was every night I had nightmares. It affected me so much. And I'd wake up crying, screaming. And my mother would come into the room, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I'd say, "Bigfoot, Bigfoot." And see, the creature that I ran into was not threatening at all, was not trying to terrorize me. It's speculation, but in retrospect, I think it was hiding its face to keep from scaring me, okay? I really believe that, because every time I would shift, he would shift his face into that bush. But the Bigfoot in my dream wants to eat me. He looks like a silverback gorilla. He's got teeth like this, and they're bloody. And let me go back. So I'm showing this area here because my grandparents' house was here, And like I said, this is right now. This is a Google image. What happened to me was 30-some years ago. The cluster of trees is gone. There used to be a cluster of trees that set between my grandparents' house and my house. And in my dream, that's where this Bigfoot lives. And I'm trying to get to my grandmother's house, and this Bigfoot won't let me. Okay, so that's what my nightmare is. But sounds real sweet and innocent, but it's terrifying. So I ended up still having these nightmares, and my mom would come into the bedroom and say, "What's wrong?" And I'd say, "Bigfoot, Bigfoot." And she's like, "You got to stop doing this. You're going to drive yourself crazy. You can just stop what you dream about. It's not that easy, Ma." So that happened in 81. The following June in 1982, my father died. As I told you, he wasn't in the best of health, and he had heart issues, and he died the last day of school. And my mother didn't lose it, but my mother kind of checked out. She grieved very hard, and it was time for me to let go of the silly things. So I had to stuff it, and I stuffed it for years. I grew into my late teens and went off to college, and anytime I always say this, I'm not blaming Bigfoot for all my adult problems, okay? It's not that. But how I dealt with things on an emotional level was deeply impacted by this Bigfoot encounter. If I had issues with relationships, I'd stuff it. I'd drink, do drugs. If I had issues with anything, deaths, somebody died in my family, somebody did a wrong or whatever, instead of expressing how I felt about it, I would stuff it. I would cover it with drugs and alcohol. And I developed a pretty good healthy habit with it. And I still had the nightmares, okay? Well, this went on forever, it seems. But
All right. So as far as Jason's story goes, let me find my glasses here. So as far as Jason's story goes, there were a couple of things that he talked about, like the animal carcasses found up in the trees. Now remember, I did a show about Bullet Maker, Doug Bilby's place in Oklahoma, that involved a steer up in a tree. So, where do you hear these things over and over again, within this subject? So he talked about that, and he talked about, I was talking before this, when I opened, about somebody there in Oklahoma, rabbit hutches, guinea pig hutches, chicken coops, the duck pen. They were being systematically plundered, one bird, one subject at a time, just like I explained. These are the kind of details that kind of get me excited, because you can see correlations when you put these things together, and you find out that the behavior, it's systematic, and it's the way they are. So you can believe what Jason is saying, as well as you can believe what Carrie Arnold was saying. These creatures were there all along. They prefer to remain hidden, but that's not always the case. So when you have an encounter by happenstance, it's generally from a mistake made by the Bigfoot. They usually don't make mistakes like that. But yeah, I'm looking for any more farmstead encounters, rural encounters, where we can talk about the details of what was going on prior to that would bring them to that location, or have them in that location all along. Uh, I hope you enjoyed this. You can look for both of these gentlemen's stories. Jason Weaver's, I'm sure you can listen to his whole encounter, and even more. And certainly Carrie Arnold. Most people know of Carrie Arnold's story. These are just snippets of their stories. The stories have much more details, uh, and they're very interesting. So, do your homework. Go there and check it out. I'm interested in the behaviors, because I'm trying to figure out ways that, just like at the 400 location, we know that they are there. I would imagine if we could find a property when they're not there, for that couple of week stretch when they're making some big circuit, we could probably find some. I'd love to go around and just talk to people and find out what's going on in their rural farmsteads. I mean, do they have things happening where, they're missing food items or missing small animals on a regular basis that they would just assume is any other predator? Oh, a bobcat does that, or a coyote, or whatever. But I'd like to determine what's being done now, with the knowledge of them being at the 400, but times when they're not there. So they're somewhere else doing something. Probably what these stories describe. They probably are making their rounds to different locations, getting food products at each location. Man, I'd love to just take the time to go and really have discussions with people that would be open to this discussion. It's hard to get past that threshold. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know I do. And I hope more people reach out to me. I'd love to get some other people's stories, that tie into these type of scenarios. So, okay, with that in mind, I am now done, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Please subscribe, share, like, help a brother out, and thank you.